Hi, welcome to the Blockchain Law Show. I'm your host, Anki Kwan. I'm a California lawyer, and in this episode, I wanted to talk about the SEC's actions against ICO players in the last month. The SEC had a very busy November, and it went after the gamut of ICO players. It went after companies that raised money with ICOs. It went after exchanges, and it even went after people that promoted ICOs. It doesn't seem like any of these players were involved in any fraudulent activity. So if you are in the ICO space, if you're thinking about raising money with an ICO or by selling tokens, if you are helping people do this, this is the episode for you. In order to understand what happened last month, it's important to go back to August of last year. In August of last year, the SEC published the Dow Report. The Dow Report was the first time that the SEC ever spoke out about the ICO space. In that report, they investigated a German company called Schlock.it. This company raised money for their decentralized organization by issuing and selling tokens called the Dow tokens. They sold these tokens to investors who were later able to sell these tokens on a secondary exchange. So the SEC in that case investigated both issuers of ICOs, particularly Schlock.it, and secondary exchanges in order to figure out what the space was about and what was going on. They decided in that case that Dow tokens are securities under the Howey test. Basically, the Howey test says that if a buyer is buying your token and they reasonably expect you to make a profit on their behalf, then it's likely that you're selling a security. There are other elements of that test that I'm not going to go into right now, but that's the gist of the Howey test. The SEC said that the Howey test is a flexible test that can be applied in a variety of situations, including when you offer and sell blockchain tokens and other types of digital assets. It's flexible enough so that it can be adapted to a variety of situations, such as ICOs. In the Dow Report, the SEC also spoke out about secondary exchanges. Specifically, they investigated exchanges that were allowing sellers and buyers to exchange Dow tokens. In the ICO space, in order for buyers of tokens to liquidate their investment, they resell these tokens on secondary exchanges. The SEC says that if these tokens are securities, then you have to register your exchange as a national securities exchange, or you have to qualify for an exemption, such as the alternative trading system exemption or ATS exemption. If you don't do that, you're in violation of the securities laws. A few months after the Dow, the SEC went after the first company that raised money with an ICO but did not commit any fraud. This company was named Munchie. Munchie raised money with an ICO, but within a day after they started their ICO, the SEC contacted them. Munchie decided that instead of going through with their ICO, they would stop their ICO and refund money to their investors. Because of this, the SEC decided not to impose any penalties on Munchie. However, that's changing. Fast forward to last month, the SEC went after two companies that were raising money around the same time that Munchie started their ICO. These two companies, Paragon and Arefox, also began their ICO. Unlike Munchie, Paragon and Arefox were successful at raising money, so they completed their ICO, and for the last year, they've been operating. Unfortunately for them, the SEC contacted them and said, you are offering and selling securities in violation of federal securities laws. You were supposed to register your offering, but you didn't. Or you were supposed to qualify for an exemption, but you don't qualify. So we're going to penalize you and you're going to have to come into compliance with the law. So the SEC fined Paragon and Arefox, and they required them to offer their investors a refund. Investors that invested in the ICO now have the option to ask Paragon and Arefox for a refund. This refund is in the amount that they paid at the time that they invested in the ICO, plus interest on top of that amount. If these investors sold their tokens, they can get the amount of their loss plus interest that they accumulated during that time. The SEC in these cases also offered a path forward to other companies that raised money with ICOs and didn't register or qualify for an exemption. If that is you, that means that you can come into compliance by registering with the SEC and offering your investors a refund. The second category of players the SEC went after are exchanges. The SEC went after an exchange called EtherDelta. In the ICO space, after investors purchase their tokens from a company in their ICO, the company attempts to get their tokens on what's called a secondary exchange. These are places where buyers can buy ERC20 tokens and sellers can sell those tokens. ERC20 tokens are the tokens that are sold in an ICO offering. Each company offers their own version of an ERC20 token, and they have different functions, but depending on the circumstances in the offer and sale of those tokens, some of these ERC20 tokens may be securities. The SEC said that some of the ERC tokens on EtherDelta are securities. Because of that, EtherDelta was required to register as a national securities exchange or qualify for an exemption to registration. Because the founder of EtherDelta didn't register the exchange or qualify for an exemption, the SEC fined the founder and they had him disgorge his profits and interest on top of those profits. In this case, the SEC again reiterated what they said in the Dow Report, that if you're an exchange and you're facilitating securities trades, then you're required to register or qualify for an exemption to registration. Like in the last case, it doesn't appear that the founder of EtherDelta engaged in fraudulent activities, but that doesn't matter in an enforcement action. If you are violating securities laws, the SEC can enforce the law against you, and they can go after you for penalties, they can have you disgorge profits, etc. In the third case, the SEC went after promoters of ICOs. A promoter is someone who gets paid to talk about an ICO and to get their community excited. For example, if you have a large Instagram following and someone that is doing an ICO approaches you and gives you $50,000 to promote their ICO, then you're a promoter. As a promoter, you're required to tell your audience that you are getting paid to promote the ICO, and you also have to tell them the amount that you're getting paid. Floyd Mayweather and DJ Khaled were paid to promote ICOs, but they didn't tell their audience that they were getting paid, nor did they tell their audience about the amount of compensation. Because of this, the SEC said that they were violating the securities laws. They had to pay a penalty, they had to disgorge profits, and they have to pay interest on those disgorged profits. In addition to that, the SEC banned Mayweather from promoting any type of securities offering for the next 2 years, and they also banned DJ Khaled from promoting any securities offerings for the next 2 years. As you can see from these cases last month, the SEC is going after ICOs, and it doesn't matter if you're doing anything fraudulent. If you're offering and selling a security, you're required to comply with securities laws. The SEC issued these warnings in the Dow Report, they issued these warnings in Munchie, and these new cases can be seen as a new set of warnings. So if you're offering and selling tokens after these proceedings and you don't comply with the law, you can expect the SEC to take an even more firm stance against you and seek stiffer penalties. It's really in your best interest to figure out how to comply with the law before you start offering or selling your tokens. Once you make that first offer, it's too late for you. You can't step back and undo the damage that you've already done. Now, the SEC is offering a path for compliance, but complying when you're expected to comply instead of cleaning up afterwards will save you a lot of time and money and heartache. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please share. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you have a great day. Bye.